All right, and we're now live. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Hope you guys are enjoying the videos thus far. Today, I have a very special guest with me. He is a professor in the McMaster Department of Kinesiology, and she teaches a wide variety of undergraduate courses. She's loved by all of her students, and her name is Dr. Krista Howarth. So, hello, Dr. Howarth. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for the really nice welcome. Nice to hear some kind things during these times.
Awesome. So, we'll get started with the first question. So, Dr. Howarth, can you tell us a little bit about what a professor does when working at the undergraduate level and some of the responsibilities that they have?
So, the way that, our workload is divided up sort of depends on what your position is within the university. And for someone like me, I'm what they can call a teaching stream professor. So what a teaching stream professor means is that all of my roles within the university are related to teaching. So I don't have a research program. The other portion of my job is a service portion, and that's about 1/5 of what I do. And that means that I provide my time for committees on the campus and off campus for societies that are related to my area of expertise. So for example, the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology, I'm a lot on several of the committees there and chair many of those committees. So we do essentially sort of volunteer work for the university and for the research community that we're part of. But for someone that's a teaching professor, primarily what I do is teach and development of courses and helping other faculty that don't teach as regularly with their courses as well. For a regular teaching or a regular traditional academic professor, they do sort of half teaching, half research, and then the service part as well.
Cool. That sounds really cool. So, can you sort of explain what made you want to pursue that whole field of teaching and why you went into the field that you currently work in?
It's kind of interesting, actually. It wasn't my intended role when I first started undergrad. I think, like many undergrad students in science, which is what I started in originally, I wanted to go to med school. So I started in first year. What at that time it was called general science. We didn't have life science. It was just general first year. And then I did my first degree in biochemistry. But again, like many students, after 4 years, maybe my grades weren't as high as I wanted them to be or needed them to be to get into med school. And I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my biochem degree. So I came back to the university and I did a second degree in kinesiology. And at the time when I started in science, kinesiology was phys ed. And I'm not really an athlete or a sports person, so that didn't really appeal to me at the time. But when it changed to kinesiology, it seemed more intriguing to me, and I was much more interested in the science side of it. And really, once I came into that undergrad program that was fairly still new at the time, it was like the merging of my two degrees into one. And it was all the biochemistry stuff that I had learned, but now applied to exercise and nutrition situations. And I found sort of that passion. And, because of that, I decided to stay in and do my master's and my PhD. And I was lucky enough to work in some world-renowned labs, which are part of our department. And specifically, I worked under Dr. Martin Gabala, and he was an amazing professor. I had him actually for Kinesiology 2CC3 when I was a student. And, the way that he taught sort of inspired me to, go the same route with teaching. And fortunately, when he was on sabbatical in my PhD, I got the chance to teach the course for the first time. And honestly, I loved it. And it's rare to have teaching positions at our university. There aren't that many teaching stream positions relative to traditional research positions. So I was lucky. I just kept telling people, if you have courses that you need taught, I'll do it, because I really found passion in it. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it. And it was sort of a reciprocal relationship with the students too, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think professors are able to really impact their students with the way they teach their courses and what they put into them. Would you be able to sort of comment on the impact that professors are able to have on students through the courses they teach, as well as the research opportunities that they're able to provide students with?
Um, well, I mean, I can only speak to what I hope they're getting from our courses. I don't really know what they're getting unless they respond back. I do get lots of nice emails at the end of semesters and at the end of, 4 years. I've had lots throughout this whole COVID situation of social isolation, because I wasn't able to say goodbye to many of the graduating students either. And, a lot of them have just said that we spark some passion for learning in the students, and a desire to learn more about specific areas. But the whole thing about university isn't just about the content that you're learning, but it's also about lifelong learning, and the skills that you need to continue to learn on your own after you leave. And really, I feel like that's one of the most important things for students, is giving you the tools that you can use to try and find out information yourself later when you're not sort of in our classes anymore. But we start you in sort of stages as you move through. Obviously, first year is a big, knowledge foundation area. You need to learn some things about your discipline. But then from then on, it's about, how you can apply that information and what you can do with it in the real world. And I think by the time you get up into your third and fourth year, hopefully we're providing courses that are giving you some skills that you can use to get jobs, or that are applicable to the real world.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think doing an undergraduate degree is super helpful for pretty much all students that go about doing it. With regards to the actual journey to your profession right now, so from the BSc to the master's to the PhD, which would you say was the most difficult aspect of your journey, or which did you enjoy the most and why?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say definitely the most challenging was my first undergrad in biochemistry. Not so much the content, but I just felt like I was in a program that wasn't really matching up with my interests. And so it was challenging to make myself go to class. And again, coming out of high school, I didn't have the tools I think I should have, or I needed, to learn to study effectively, to, again, that whole gathering of information and retaining information, and applying that information. I just didn't quite get it. And I was doing a lot of memorizing and things like that in my first undergrad, and it didn't serve me well. But once I got into kinesiology as my second degree, not only had I learned from my mistakes in my first degree in terms of study skills, but the passion for learning was there because I was interested in the material. So because I was interested in the material and my professors were really engaging and excited about what they were doing, I was more inclined to go to class and listen. And because you're more inclined to go to class, you benefit from the information, firsthand. You guys know what it's like to learn something online versus in class. Sometimes it's a little easier to pay attention sometimes when you're in person relative to looking at the computer. In terms of the best times, definitely grad school. My kin undergrad degree was only 2 years because I did it as a second degree. So I didn't have the kin family network like most kin students do, going through their 4-year degree with their cohort. So mine was truncated. I did first and second year in 1 year, and then I did third and fourth year in 1 year. So there was a small group of us that were doing second degree. I got to be quite friends with them. Many of them have gone on to be physicians. So they did take the med school route. But I took a different route, and I applied for a research assistant position that was in the department as an undergrad student. And it was actually motor control, which is totally not my area of expertise. I'd only taken one course in it at that point. And luckily I got hired for a semester, and I worked in Dr. Digby Elliott's lab, who previously was a professor in our department. And I really got to know what grad school was like, working with the grad students, running the studies, and I loved it. And so I applied to do my master's and my PhD. And honestly, best times of my life. Like, from getting to be a little more of your own individual in terms of your learning. Of course, you still have courses and so on that you have to, but it's much more self-directed. You get to sort of do things that you're interested in or your area of expertise. You're not doing all these other things. The research I loved. I loved being in the lab. I loved running samples. Obviously, with my biochem degree, that was kind of my passion in the first place, was the lab experiences. So this was a perfect mix of that. And because I was the first student ever through Dr. Gabala's lab, I also had a lot of mentorship roles where the new grad students coming in would come to me for learning lab experiences and so on. And because of that, the lab network was very close. So you talk about, I mean, I'm lifelong friends with those people now, and many of them are professors at other universities. So, I always wondered, how does my professor or my supervisor know so many people in the field? And it's because they were all in grad school together as well. And it's a small community. And because of that, it's a close-knit community. And it's really fun when you get to see people at conferences, and, you get the knowledge, but you get the social as well. And that's how you can make good connections for research collaborations and stuff as well. So it really was an amazing time to be a grad student in our department, just with the friendships and the research that was going on. It was the start of, HIT training at the time, and people didn't believe us and that it was good for you. And so, it was kind of a great time to be in our department.
Yeah.
As is now, but I'm not doing research anymore.
Yeah, it seems like a really long journey, but obviously one with lots of ups and downs, and it's definitely worth it, as we can see. So
most people don't take quite as long a journey as I did, but lots of self-reflection along the way. I chose the teaching route over the research route for a reason, and that was because I'd spent a lot of time in my Ph.D. not being happy about sitting in front of my computer writing papers all the time. And the idea of writing grants for the rest of my life and, writing papers, but I don't get to be in the lab doing the lab stuff that I loved, that part didn't appeal to me. So when I reflected back on my PhD, the part that I found the most joy from was the teaching part. And just luckily enough, I hounded enough people to get some teaching positions, and eventually, a teaching stream position opened up. So
yeah, and it worked out well, which is great.
It was literally, it was just a series of events and opportunities that were small that led to something bigger.
Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah, and it's great that you can do a PhD and then always go a different route, whether it be research or with teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. So now that you're finally here and you have like well-established job, can you tell us a little bit about what a typical day in your life might look like as a professor from a Monday to Friday? Obviously not during the pandemic, but during the regular semester.
So it varies quite a bit depending on the day, obviously, because some days are very teaching heavy and other days are not. So if it's a teaching heavy day, then I spend a lot of my time just running back and forth to classes, much like a student, right? So I prepare probably half an hour to an hour in advance of the lecture, and then I gather up all my stuff, go to the class and teach my lecture. And then come back and get ready for the next one. So often the whole day is just running around to get to lectures and getting the lecture kind of prepared and ready to deliver in my head. I always say to students, they're like, oh, I remember on a course evaluation once they said to me that, you only teach 3 lectures a week for the course. So, that's 3 hours. You're not doing anything the rest of the time. But if you've ever had to give a 10-minute presentation on something before, you know how much work goes into even just a 10-minute presentation for an assignment. And think about, we're doing 50 minutes, multiple times a day sometimes. And so it does take a lot of preparing, which is basically what I do in the rest of my time, is creating lecture content, refining lecture content, finding new research that's out there that I can apply and put into the content. For me, during the school year, that doesn't get to happen quite so much. I need to do that stuff outside of the school year because it's hard to put things in as you go, because I do have such a heavy course load. I spend a lot of my time during the school year with student questions. So whether it's emails or student meetings or office hours, a lot of my time, because I teach over 1,000 students each semester, is interacting with the students, which I love. But it takes up a lot of your extra, time to do your course prep and things like that. So I would say, a typical day is you teach a little bit, you prep your course that's hopefully already prepared in advance, whether you've spent the summer working on it or, you spent the weekend working on it or whatever it may be. And then you teach and you come back and you answer emails, you interact with students, you have meetings, that kind of thing. Usually once a week we have, as I said, committee meetings. So you'll spend time talking with, your department or other people on campus, creating some policies or guidelines for students, reading through student award applications and, ethics proposals to approve them, and all of those things that go on behind the scenes. Those are often parts of our service loads as well. So again, it kind of depends on the day. I don't do a lot of, I just started doing some pedagogical research. So I don't do very much research at all, but that's an extra piece. And really, I sort of took on the research role more recently because my courses are becoming more established. So it's not like I'm spending time making PowerPoints for anatomy, for example, because I have them prepared from previous years and I've tested them out and I know that they're at the level that I was hoping they would be, at least. So it's a busy day, but it goes by really fast as well. So it's not one of those jobs where you're thinking, oh my goodness, like the day is going so slow. If anything, you need more hours every day.
For sure. Yeah. And there's really no typical day as a professor.
There isn't, honestly. Every single day is different.
Yeah. Which is good. I mean, for, I guess, a lot of people, like for me personally, I would want things to change up every day, but I guess their own niche.
I mean, you get into a bit of a routine with your classes, just like students do.
Yeah.
But there's heavy times and less heavy times, midterm season comes and you're writing midterms. You guys are all stressed about taking them, but we're, working behind the scenes trying to create questions and, sometimes staying up late. The only thing that's hard about my job is that there's a deadline every day. So you can't have a bad day. You have to be on all the time. And if you're having a bad day, you still have to show up and do your job. You can't just call in sick, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most challenging part of the job, is just trying to be engaging and excited and everything every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually my next question. I was going to ask, what do you feel is the most difficult aspect of your job? So you're talking about engaging students in lectures.
I mean, that's my favorite part as well. But I'm just to be on all the time, as you can imagine, you got to be excited and energetic. And some days that's challenging to do that. But honestly, I love my job. And I think, even when I think back to when I was a kid, I was always a public speaker. I was that kid in grade 6 that stood up in front of their school with their speech. I just was a talker. And I think, I originally wanted to be a teacher when I was a kid, but the idea of teaching, in high school and later in elementary school where kids don't want to learn, I found that challenging. And this university environment is so amazing because the students that come to class are the ones that want to learn. And it's, it's more of a reciprocal relationship that way, I think. So it's been a great opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Would you be able to comment on some of the differences between teaching at the undergraduate level or at the university level compared to teaching at, like you were just mentioning, at the elementary school or high school level? Can you highlight some of the differences or similarities?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I only know from my experience as a student through those years, as well as I have several friends that work in the, education in high school and elementary school levels. I think, again, like there's a lot of differences. One, in order to become a teacher, you need to go to teachers college. Whereas in order to be a professor at the university, you need a Ph.D., which really you're being trained to do research. You're not being trained to teach. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a challenge for many professors because, their whole career up until that point has trained them for the research side of things. And also knowledge translation, which is really important, because what good is research if nobody learns about it? But we don't really get taught how to teach effectively. And so you have to take a little bit of initiative to try and learn some of those skills on your own. And we have a great, institute at McMaster, the McPherson Institute, and they are really helpful with professors and trying to help guide them for teaching and learning practice. But as I said, I think one of the biggest things is that we have much more freedom than high school, elementary school teachers do. And freedom in terms of the content that we teach and the style of teaching and the, even just how we present the information. High school and elementary school obviously have a curriculum, and they don't get to pick necessarily even which courses they're teaching. It's picked by their principal. I mean, we still have that a little bit within the department, but it's not like, they're going to choose me to go start teaching the biomechanics courses or the ergonomics courses. We get to teach within our discipline, which sometimes doesn't happen in high schools and elementary schools. So I think that lack of freedom is hard. And again, like the whole fact that the students want to be here at university, they're paying to be here, and they're adults. So you can have, actually intellectual conversations with them, which is really, really great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think some people prefer to teach younger students and some people prefer to teach older students. So whatever
it's whatever your passion is, right? And I just found that I liked this age group.
Yeah, for sure. Would you be able to comment on, so you were talking about differences in people who teach different types of courses and different populations. So obviously there's a whole bunch of professors at McMaster. They're all working in different labs. They teach different courses. Would you be able to comment on how your job is sort of different from most other professors at McMaster and how it's a little bit in terms of research and the courses you teach as well?
Yes. As I said, like I'm a teaching stream professor. So what that means is that the majority of my workload is teaching. Typically in our department, a full teaching workload is 6 courses. So I teach anatomy twice a day. So that counts as an extra half a course, basically. So depending on the year and what else is sort of happening, but it's typical that you're teaching 3 lectures in each semester, or three courses each semester. Whereas an academic professor, half of them, their job is teaching and half is research. So they'll teach 3 courses and then the other portion is the research component. And sometimes if they have really big research grants or they're part of the Canadian, the CRC, the Canadian, I'm blanking out on that, what the acronym stands for all of a sudden. But if they've gotten to that level of high quality research, then sometimes they can do more research and less teaching. And often that is what happens in our department. We have lots of CRCs it stands for Canada Research Chair. I just blanked out on that for a second. So Canada Research Chairs, and there's different tiers of those as well. So new researchers starting out and people that are well established. We have several of them in our department, in fact, and because of that, they don't do a lot of extra teaching. So they might only teach 1 or 2 courses instead of 3. And administrative load is also something that changes your teaching responsibilities. And that's, for example, when I was the undergrad chair last semester, I got teaching relief so that I could do that part of the job. The chair of our department gets teaching relief. The graduate chair, the graduate chair gets teaching relief. We have, Dr. Phillips is the director of the PACE. So all of those positions that have other components where you're trying to help run the department, run programming and so on, then that changes what you do in terms of your teaching and research loads. But in terms of the courses that you teach, it's really somewhat chosen by your department and somewhat chosen by you. So your interests, your areas of expertise, and then a need within the department as well.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like there's a whole bunch of different opportunities as a professor. So this next one's a bit of a tough question, but what do you feel is one of the biggest misconceptions about university professors, or a stereotype you feel that exists around your job?
Good question. I would say the biggest misconception is that we have summers off. because no matter where I go, and people say, oh, well, what do you do in the summer? You just have the summer off, don't you? That's great. You have 4 months off. But the summer for a teaching professor is when we do all that course prep that we don't have time for in the school year. For researchers, they run a lot of their research studies in the summer because, again, during the school year, they have teaching load, they have department committee responsibilities, they're trying to write papers. So usually during the summertime is when the research ramps up. So you're getting subjects coming in, you're collecting data, all of those really long trial days happen. So it really depends on what you do. But that's definitely one misconception, is that, we're just around for short periods of time, and then the rest of the time we're doing nothing, or we're relaxing. I would say that's a bit of a stereotype. Maybe not within the university, hopefully not so much within the university, but definitely outside the university, people think that. My family members, not my immediate family, but extended family, like, oh, you have the summer off. And no, not really. Lots to do in the summertime, but yeah, I would say that's probably the biggest misconception. Within our department, honestly, I don't think we have a lot of stereotypes, or at least I don't see them. I know that women in science is a bit of an issue, and equity and diversity in hirings and things like that can be challenging. And the university is doing a really good job of trying to make things more equitable in terms of our faculty and who's being hired, and trying to, get people to even apply to positions. It's still challenging. It's still largely male based, but within kinesiology, we're actually very, well distributed in terms of male female ratio, at least. Obviously, we're still lacking in a little bit of diversity. So every round of applicants, we're trying to promote positions and within different realms, and hopefully get more and really good quality people applying to our program.
For sure. I think those misconceptions are always going to be there, but it's good to address them.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. So this is sort of the last question, sort of the big impact question. But what advice would you want to give to someone who's trying to pursue a career path that is similar to yours in the stream of teaching, or even as a professor at the university level?
Great question. Persistence is key. Obviously, you need to do well in your undergrad degree, but start early if you can. I really encourage students to try and at least volunteer in research labs, because getting into professional schools, based on your grades, it's based on your, extracurricular activities, but getting into grad school is much different. It's more about your role and place in someone else's lab. So yes, you need to have sort of the basic grades to get in, but they also want someone that might have some experiences or something else to bring to the lab, and that will be like a good colleague in that lab as well. So getting to know the professors is really key, because it's hard for them when they're looking at two applications. Who am I going to pick? They're going to pick the person they know over the person they don't know often. Even though the person they don't know might have better grades, they know this other person that might not have done so well in their undergrad courses. They are a really good fit with the lab. So I think that is really key if you want to pursue, your master's and your PhD, is get in, talk to professors early. Don't wait until fourth year. Try and do a thesis if you can, an undergrad thesis. Try and do some of those research practicums, because those are really the students that get in. And then, in terms of getting a teaching position at the university, I would say most of the people that teach are PhD level, but there are other levels that teach as well. Sometimes you need a master's, but you might have some expertise in another area. So Krista Madsen, for example, she's an athletic therapist and she has her master's. She doesn't have her PhD, but because she has those clinical skills from her other degree that she has, that made her an ideal candidate for what she teaches. So depends on where you are and what department you're working in. So I think, making yourself a commodity in terms of the skills you have that are unique compared to someone else. And a lot of that comes down to, labs that you've worked in and opportunities that you've been given. for teaching, it's tough because most people that do their PhD never teach. They might be a TA, but they don't get an opportunity to teach until after they finish their PhD. I was lucky. I got to teach a course in my PhD before I had graduated. And it was really that opportunity and the course evaluations I got from that gave me further opportunities. So it's kind of about timing sometimes. It's a tough career path because there's not a lot of positions out there. But it's rewarding once you sort of get where you're going to go.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I had a quick follow-up question to that, though, because you mentioned doing research at the undergraduate level and then pursuing a master's as well. So obviously there's a lot of undergrad students, they want to go to med school and they know that they need to do some form of research if they want to have a strong application. Would you be able to comment on what advice you can give undergraduate students who are trying to pursue research, whether that be alongside a master's student or a professor during their actual bachelor's degree?
So in terms of like how to get a position or just
Yeah, like how would you go about getting a good position?
it's tough because there are so few positions, not because professors don't want to take students, but we do have sort of a limited number of professors in our department because we are a smaller department compared to other ones on campus, like psychology, for example. It's quite large. They have many faculty compared to us. We're under 20 faculty in our department, and 3 of us don't teach, or 3 of us teach only. We don't do research specifically because we're teaching stream. So again, it's all about getting your foot in the door. So even if you have to start out by volunteering in first and second year, and then keep pursuing, show interest in what you're doing. I think professors see when there's the person that's doing it because they want to put it on their med school application, and the person that's doing it because they actually enjoy and are keen to learn research skills. You have to put yourself out there, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people because you have to be, persistent sometimes without being overbearing to your professors, reaching out to them, following up with them, asking for meetings, that kind of thing. But really getting them to know you well enough that they would trust to have you in their lab. And what can you bring to their lab as well? And then just make sure that you show up for things, because lots of people volunteer in people's labs and they show up once or twice, and then their commitments for academics take over and they're like, oh, I can't come, I'm too busy. That doesn't really show a lot of I'm blanking out on the word again. A lot of drive for doing that research, and I think if there's not that drive there, then they're going to be less inclined to take you as a grad student. Sure. I was lucky because Dr. Gabala was new at the university, and I had a biochem degree, so I had lab skills, which a lot of kin students don't have because they don't necessarily take those courses where you're learning, how to do wet lab type of work. So I was someone that didn't need all that extra training to get my foot in the door. So that was my advantage. Again, like giving yourself that edge over someone else is really important. And in my case, it just happened to be that I had those lab skills. And so little bit by little bit, I think the most successful people are getting master's and PhD positions are the ones that have been persistent over their undergrad degree and continued to try and work in people's labs.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, that's amazing advice. I'm sure people will find that helpful. That does end the interview though. So thank you so much again, Dr. Howarth, for taking the time to do this. I'm sure people will really appreciate it. Do you have any last words before we start?
No, thank you for inviting me to do this. It's always nice to have a conversation with students, and hopefully this is helpful for students if they're pursuing or they're thinking about pursuing being a professor for their career. It's one of those options out there for sure, and there's lots of different options out there. So that's the other thing I say to students as well. As a kid, you always want to be what you see. You want to be a nurse, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a teacher, you want to be a fireman, because those are the jobs that you see. But there's so many different career paths out there that you don't see. and someone's doing those jobs. And it's not like they grew up saying, I'm going to be this when I grow up, because they didn't even know what it was. So it's all about just, taking those small opportunities that might come up along the way, and then learning what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, where your fits might be. And I think that is being persistent again in undergrad and trying things out, and maybe not being so driven on just one thing either. Having an open mind to branch out to other opportunities.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much again, Dr. Howarth. So that does end today's episode. Once again, everyone, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you next time and next week's episode.